Hey everyone, I just want to make a quick clarification before we get into the video. I've listened to the video you're about to see in a moment, and didn't realise just how aggressive I've come across as. If upon listening to my points you think that I come across as an entitled whiny brat, then I understand. However, the reason I decided to be so aggressive with my criticisms is so that I could write home just how disappointed and let down I feel. Nonetheless, I want to make it clear that none of my aggression is directed as a personal attack on any individual person. I still have a ton of respect for everyone working at 343, and my anger is purely directed at the situation that the game is in. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the video.
Take my hand, son. No.
343.
I'm just
Tired of being let down. Buying your game on launch.
no more. No more. No more.
You're probably clicking on this video thinking that I'm being melodramatic. And you know what? Maybe I am. However, in the last video I made about this, I went very far out of my way to make it clear to everyone that I want the game to succeed, and I'm not just trying to bash 343 for everything they've ever made. But if there's one thing that I've learned from my last video, it's that no matter what I say, there'll always be some people that somehow get the impression that I'm overreacting to minor things, and I'm just trying to come up with excuses to hate 343. So you know what? I'm not even going to bother attempting to please these people. I'm angry, I'm pissed, I feel completely and utterly let down, and I'm not sugarcoating my criticisms. So 343, you better make sure you have an overshield, because I'm going to lay out my criticisms with more aggression than an 8-year-old with a 60-round assault rifle. So where do I even begin? I just came back from my holiday, and my plan was to talk about the Halo Infinite tech demo that I got invited to. I was planning to make the video for a while, but kept putting it off. I was genuinely more excited about the game than I'd ever been, because I absolutely loved the demo, and had an absolute blast playing against the bots. So you're probably wondering how my opinions could have possibly taken such a huge U-turn. Well, let me enlighten you. Essentially, you know how one of the many controversies with Halo 5 was that it didn't include split-screen co-op? 343 made it absolutely clear to us that they learned from this by promising that Halo Infinite will have split-screen co-op at launch. Well, today I found out that 343 decided to take that promise and take a huge steaming crap on it. On August 20th, 343 announced that Campaign Co-op and Forged would not be released alongside the game's launch. Notice how I didn't say split-screen co-op. 343 have confirmed that Halo Infinite will not be possible to play co-op on in any capacity on launch.
We made the really tough decision to delay shipping Campaign Co-op for launch, and we also made the tough call to delay shipping Forge past launch as well.
Well, Joseph, I mean, clearly this was not a decision that you or the team has taken lightly, right? I mean, we know.
So essentially, you'll not only be unable to play split-screen co-op, you won't be able to play co-op with your friends through Xbox Live, PC, or any other online form. It will be completely missing as a feature on the game's launch. Somehow, Halo Infinite will end up missing more fundamental features on launch than Halo 5 did. I want you to understand that I was one of those people that frequently came to 343's defense whenever they received criticism. When the campaign gameplay released and people were complaining about the bad looking graphics, I defended them saying that the art style at least looks decent, and the gameplay looks amazing, which is ultimately what matters the most. All other disappointing news that I heard about the game was mostly considered minor, and absolutely weren't deal breakers for me. Even not having Forge on launch is not a big deal to me. Having no campaign co-op, however, is absolutely a deal breaker for me. If 343 do not do anything to rectify this, I will not be buying the game on launch, and will instead wait until the game implements co-op, by which point the game will probably be on sale. And yes, I'm aware that the game will be released on Game Pass, but I want to own a physical copy of the game, so I will be buying it separately. Since co-op won't be coming until Season 2, and apparently each season will last 3 months, that means I won't be playing the game until 3 months after launch. I'm not even doing this for the sake of voting with my wallet. I just have literally no reason to play this game until this feature is implemented. I want my first experience of the campaign to be with my friends, and I will not have it any other way, as that's how it's always been for me. There is absolutely no excuse for this. None. Under the assumption that it isn't feasible for 343 to delay the game because of Microsoft, they had 6 years of development. Yes, I'm aware that there was a pandemic, but even if we don't count any of the time that they were in the pandemic, they still had a lot more development time than they did on Halo 5. If you still want to argue that they didn't have enough time, then 343 should have prioritized these features over ones that aren't, you know, part of the literal backbone of what makes a Halo game. While I love the advanced AI that 343 managed to come up with to add the ability for players to play against bots, this was something that would have been absolutely fine to wait until after launch to have. Since no Halo game before it has ever had this feature, it's ultimately a bonus and a nice to have, not a fundamental requirement. So choosing not to work on this and instead focusing on implementing campaign co-op would have ultimately been the better move. The last excuse that I'm tired of hearing is that game development is hard and unpredictable, especially when it comes to massive teams. And since we have no knowledge of what game development is like, we can't truly understand why the game is taking so long to get to the state we want it to be in. What I'm about to say is not intended as a boast, and I'm only purely stating this for the purposes of being taken seriously. If I don't disclose this, people will invalidate my opinions by saying I have no knowledge of game development and therefore have no idea what I'm talking about. While I may not have as much knowledge of working in massive teams, and I certainly do not have the amount of game development knowledge that the many employees at 343 have, as of right now, I am a qualified software engineer, and currently make a living by helping develop virtual reality applications using video game engine software. I'm not going to state the name of the company I work at, because I don't like to give personal information about myself that someone could use to learn more about me in real life. So if you choose not to believe me about my job, that's your prerogative. I've experienced being part of a team that worked on an application for many years. I joined the team quite late in the development process, but nonetheless contributed a fair amount. The application ultimately failed to make a profit because despite the fact that the app had done many things that had never been achieved before by any other VR app, and that it was also released by an already established company that was recognized worldwide, it lacked many features that would have otherwise made the app much more appealing. As a result, the app got a decent amount of traction at the start, but quickly lost a lot of its fan base before much live service content was delivered. And ultimately the app is now planned to be scrapped in roughly a year or two, after being hopefully replaced by a superior version of the app that is currently in development. Ultimately, the team I'm working in isn't ginormous, but was large enough that its poor management had a huge impact on how much development got done. We had bad forms of acceptance criteria. We would frequently run into bottlenecks as a result of only certain tasks being able to be done by certain developers. There was a lack of documentation for the tools we created and implemented, making it harder for new developers to join, because it was difficult for them to understand enough of the code in order to be able to contribute to it, and many other factors that may not have happened had the team been managed properly. And now the team has had a complete restructure from the ground up in order to address these problems. I would assume that if bad management can have a large impact on a smaller team like mine, it would be more so the case for a massive team. The point I'm making here is that ultimately if 343 have failed to create a content-rich game in 6 years, something went wrong with managing the teams working on the game. What that something is could be many things, but nonetheless, it means that 343 are still to be held accountable for failing to deliver. But let's talk from a viewpoint that doesn't actually require any game development knowledge whatsoever. companies bigger than 343 have managed to complete games in reasonable timeframes. Ultimately, saying game development is hard as a defense for 343's shortcomings is a bad argument. Because yes, game development is hard, but if it's too hard for 343, they shouldn't be the ones developing the games. Game development is not a charity, it's a business. You're choosing to take upon the task of developing a game for one of the biggest franchises in a heavily competitive industry in the hopes of turning a profit. I have no doubt that Halo Infinite will turn a profit purely because of the fact that it's part of a popular game franchise. Halo 5 was technically a success, even when you only take into account game sales and not the money they made off of microtransactions. However, I believe that not implementing this feature will make the sales of the Halo Infinite campaign very underwhelming compared to what it ultimately could have been. And I think it also has the potential to cause long-term irreparable How the hell do you say irreparable? And I think it also has the potential to cause long-term irreparable damage to 343's reputation as game developers in the same way that Halo 4 and 5 did. Okay, so I'm just in the middle of editing this, and I just want to quickly acknowledge two posts that were recently made. One is a very convincing Reddit post made by someone who claims to be a 343 employee, and another is a Twitter thread by Tyler Owens, a former 343 developer. Firstly, the Reddit post. Bear in mind there isn't any evidence that this is actually a 343 employee, but I am fairly convinced because the guy seems to know what he's talking about, and he even seems to use code words that are directed at people who know specific info about the game. That said, I still recommend that you take this with a grain of salt. Essentially, the post claims that a lot of the game was rewritten by Joseph Staten when he joined a year ago, due to the fact that some of the campaign gameplay wasn't very exciting, so a lot of time was taken away doing that. And essentially, the reason co-op was so hard for them to implement was because nobody planned ahead for it, as they didn't realise how difficult it would be. They'll also not be able to delay the game because the suits are refusing to let them, so they're essentially trapped in a corner. On the one hand, I do feel at least a little less worried for the game down the line, knowing that it's heading in the right direction. On the other hand, part of me feels even more pissed off that the game was in such a bad state only last year that Joseph Staten basically had to turn the game around by scrapping a lot of the content nobody wanted. It makes me wonder what on earth they were planning to release before the game got delayed. I'm also annoyed that absolutely no one thought of the fact that having multiplayer in an open world would be significantly more difficult than implementing it into a linear game. Now for Tyler Owens' Twitter thread. There isn't really much for me to say about this one. He gives a lot of great insight as to why the game is so difficult to pull off. I'll link the Twitter thread in the description, as I recommend you read it for yourself if you're interested in knowing about this type of thing. However, the argument essentially boils down to game development is hard, and to give him credit, he does admit that, and clarifies that he's not trying to justify 343's decisions. But for those of you that are using this argument to justify their actions, I already discussed earlier why I think this is a bad argument. Okay, back to me from the past. On the off chance that 343 might be watching this video, then all I really have to say is this. Please, please, please delay the game if you can. If Halo Infinite launches in the state that they're currently planning for it to be in, then myself and many others won't buy the game on launch. And for those of you that are saying that we'll have to wait the same amount of time regardless of whether it's delayed or not, the difference is that if it's released without the co-op features, millions of people will have played the game and will know the story. And me and many others like me will have to avoid spoilers for 3 months. That's an almost impossible task. I'm 100% aware of the leaks that occurred, and that the story has already technically been spoiled. However, we're talking about the difference between a couple thousand people looking at a Reddit post, and millions of people playing the game to experience the story for themselves. The difference is huge. If campaign co-op isn't a big deal to you, and is not a feature that you'll be using, then good for you. But I want you to understand that just because it's not a big deal to you, it doesn't change the fact that this is a problem for many, many people who want to play the campaign with their friends on launch. Anyway, that's pretty much everything I wanted to say about this issue. If you guys enjoyed this video, then please give it a thumbs up, and if you're not already, please subscribe to my channel and click on the notification bell if you want to get notified of future videos that I make. I also have a Patreon that helps me get animation work done, so if you want to consider supporting me financially, donating as little as $1 a month will absolutely mean the world to me. I also want to give a massive thank you to Haya and Autark Morn for choosing to become Patreon supporters. Now, if you don't mind, I've got to get off my arse and do more work on Fireteam Expendable Season 2 Episode 1. It's been over a year since the last Fireteam Expendable episode, and yet I'd say the latest episode is only 60 to 70% done, due to the fact that it's going to be a big step up in quality, and it's going to be a much longer episode than any of the previous ones. But trust me, it will be worth the wait, so please, just be patient with me. That's all from me, so thanks for watching, and peace out.